Hi, good afternoon. It's Jim from the maverickstar Observatory. In this video, guys, we're going to be talking about food losses, food alternatives, climate change, about a magnetometer that is going out to Tucson, Arizona, as well as a certain behaviour not seen since the last World War return. I'm talking about that socialist behaviour of the burning of the books and information. Guys, we really are in dark times right now, and it's only a matter of time before people start waking up on a larger scale and the chaotic behaviour beginning. So before we get into these subjects, I just want to say, as usual, big thanks to the support of a few people that are backing us at our observatory here in the UK. We're a very small observatory. Most of you know I've ran it from my home here in Coventry for a good few years now. We've collected data, at least with the TriMag, for a couple of years, the data with the magnetosphere sensor, and you may well know, if you've been following us, that we've got magnetometers all over the world, and there's more going out this month, and February is going to be a really exciting time when we start getting back the information on the low intensity in the South Atlantic anomaly, which is the lowest intensity on our planet, muons. That's what we're talking about. We want to know what the muon count is in there, and then we're going to measure the highest, and we're going to see what levels of protection you get with a magnetosphere protection of even at around about 20% loss or a bit more. So big thanks to you guys that support us, and if a few more can come on board, that'll be great. You can support us with the PayPal link or the Patreon, whichever you feel comfortable with. And what you've got to remember is it's not compulsory, but we do need money to keep the observatory running and putting the equipment out. So let's get on with it. Food losses, guys, we're starting to see it now spread further towards the equatorial region. A lot of the northern hemisphere square acreage is gradually and slowly going offline, and I think it's only a matter of time before the masses of the public over the northern hemisphere, north of the equator, start to realise that there is something going on, and that there is an agenda to keep the majority of people in the dark about this subject that we know about. And I'm not just talking about the grand solar minimum and the effects with the shrinkage of the heliosphere allowing more cosmic radiation in, or the magnetic pole reversal with the weakening of our magnetosphere as the poles go into a reversal. I'm also talking about the effects of more cosmic radiation on our jet streams, and in turn on our climate and natural seasons. It's all being affected. It's not just food losses we're seeing food prices increase, as you would expect when any commodity starts to come into small yields or small amounts. Its value goes up. It's no different from anything. But in short, guys, we're seeing a massive abuse take place. It's not just related to food, it's related to the workforce, it's mismanagement of global governance everywhere, and it is damaging now. Even our own communities, we are starting to see these changes take effect in our communities, and I trust me, guys, we are not at the worst of this yet. But I will say this, with what we're witnessing here in the UK, with herd hustling, people going into the farmers' fields, cutting up the cows for the meat and leaving all the unwanted parts on the field for the farmer to clean up. And it's not just with cows, it's with cattle across the range. We're also seeing a large amount of lakes lose their stocks of carp, which is seen as a sport in our country. Well, the people that are catching a lot of these carp aren't putting them back in, and obviously they are taking them back home to eat them. It's not just that. We're going to see a return to eating foods that have sort of like gone out of fashion. Let's call them retro foods, and I'm talking about rabbits and pigeons and things like that. We're going to start hearing of more people going back to eating those things. When you can't afford to eat steak, you move to something else. If it's lamb, and then you can't afford to do that, you're going to probably eat chickens. And if you can't afford to eat chickens, you're going to look for an alternative every time something becomes hard to get hold of. And that's what we're seeing already. And you've probably seen it in other parts of the world, in your countries. I say there's a massive abuse going on, and it's not just related to the food industry and what's taking place with price hikes, crop losses and things like that. It actually goes into the labour market, and it's a gross neglect of failing to see something very obviously coming about and not doing nothing about it. And what I'm talking about is the advance in technology and the technological advancement. Every time we have brought new technology into the market, people have lost jobs as a result of it. If you go back 40 years ago, there used to be such jobs classed as paper clerks. There's no such thing as that anymore, or if they are a rare job to have. Technology's replaced a lot of paper now. Most stuff is done online or via email, and the amount of actual letters has reduced in the last 20 years, and that has had a massive effect on all walks of careers across the range. You've probably seen the people in your shopping centre. I'm talking about the cashiers disappearing. That's because we've got now cashless checkouts, where you can put the stuff on the scales, or you can just scan it yourself, and then it'll tell you to put it in the bag, and then you pay for it by card. Again, jobs being lost. And this governments across the world knew this was going to happen, but failed to do anything about it. The problem is, guys, is that we live in a monetary system, and if you cannot get a job in this monetary system, you can't afford to participate in that monetary system. It's as simple as that. How can you not recognise that this was going to be a problem in the future? How can you could just continually go down the road and not face facts to this? If you did mention this to governments in the UK, they would at least say, well, if this is a situation for a particular person, they are out of work, there are benefits, but the benefits are so underpaid that you are immediately put into poverty as a result of going on to benefits, and you are lucky if you can just about put food on your table and heat your home. In fact, there is a lot of people in our country which are dying through something they shouldn't be dying of, which is hypothermia. I'm talking mainly about elderly people, because they can't afford to do the two. They can't afford to put food on the table at the same time as heat the home. So it's heat or eat for these people, and a lot of them obviously would rather have food than no eating and put some extra clothing on. But sadly, for a lot of people in this country, they have died as a result of low temperatures in their own homes, and it's a disgrace. And we're seeing this behaviour continually go on, unaddressed and neglected. So it is only going to be a matter of time before more and more people are affected with all the changes that are taking place. And it's not just with relationship to the climate that we monitor here at the observatory. It is to do with the economy across the range, and the management of governance around the world. It's horrifying. And I talk about this, returning back to this socialist behaviour. They've already started, guys, to go after the people with an alternative view to theirs. If you're not singing from the same hymn sheet as theirs, they are going after you. You will notice underneath my video and a lot of other people's videos, like Adapt 2030, the Ice Age Farmer, Diamond at the Open Ammon Ranch, and a lot of other people on YouTube like myself that talk about these issues, you will notice that certain banners are turning up and trying to discredit us. We saw a certain behaviour just before the Second World War, and that was when the Germans were burning literature, and we are starting to see a similar high-tech version of that today. And it's only a matter of time before they change the mental abuse towards people like ourselves to a more physical abuse. And that can be in a manner of cutting your salary if you don't, say what they tell you to say. If you work for specific organisations, we know that this has already happened. A lot of scientists have had the funding cut if they don't support global warming. Recently, we heard that NASA and NOAA were asking the British Geological Survey if they would adjust their temperature charts to match theirs, that they have, criminally adjusted to suit the rising CO2. But this is going to come back on NASA, because the planet is cooling and has started to cool for around 15 years. Antarctica ice is actually on the increase and has been for many years. And what I say is this is going to come back on NASA again, and NOAA and all these other organisations, is because temperature drives CO2, not the other way around. So the temperature is dropping on the planet, and we could be going back into a glacial period, but temperature is what controls the levels of CO2, and it's only because we've had an unusual period of warming for the last 12,000 years. And I'll bring up that chart now, because we have obviously been looking at this image for a long time. I know you guys like to have something else to look at while we talk about it, but we will get back on it. Let's soon find the image that we're talking about. So here, towards the most modern times, you can see where the zero is. You can see, if you just look at the peak of temperature there, you can see that the temperature has held for the last 12,000 years, and it's through that CO2 has risen to over 400 parts per million at the moment, and it fluctuates on a daily, weekly basis. As you've been seeing from our observatory, we're showing you atmospheric CO2 levels range from about 380 parts per million to 440 parts per million. The point is that I want to make here is NASA are going to come unstuck, because as you can see from this chart, the last 4 cycles of returning to glacial periods, when temperature drops, CO2 drops, and they are going to probably try and at that point manipulate CO2 data, and it's going to be very easy to catch them out if we've got atmospheric CO2 monitors in different places around the world. And we certainly have a vehicle to do that, guys. We can put more CO2 detectors around the world and not only collect data on muons, magnetic field strength in those vicinities, and we can also collect CO2 data as well as background radiation with Geiger counters. But when we start to see the temperatures drop, and we will do soon, we're going to start to see CO2 follow it, as it has done over the last 400,000 years. So they've got nowhere to run. It's only a matter of time before they embarrass themselves for the second time running. The first time was saying that man-made CO2 in the atmosphere was causing climate change, when clearly 400,000 years ago we've had many times where CO2's risen. It just hasn't risen to the point of where it has, simply because if you look at all the peaks on that chart, you'll see that temperature has held for the last 12,000 years. The Industrial Revolution started in 1760, and that temperature was going high for a lot longer than the fact of the going back to the Industrial Revolution. So it's just ridiculous what they're saying, that man has affected the climate by adding more climate CO2 to it. What you've got to remember is that this is nothing short of a religion, this CO2 nonsense. And I'm also aware that some of the greatest people on our planet, scientific minds like Freeman Dyson, have agreed the same thing, that this is a religion, and it's just people jumping on the bandwagon with pure blind faith, following it. The problem is that they've destroyed and crippled and charged us all taxes as a result of this, and it's nothing short of criminal behaviour, and they are going to start coming out after us more than what they are as the time goes on. They're being caught out nearly on a daily basis with their lives now. There's people like Tony Heller, if you follow him, great guy, great researcher in my opinion, gets to the point, shows you what they've done, goes back into the data, again delivers facts. You can't knock him, he's doing a great job, but he will come under attack, I guarantee you, as well most of us in the end. And this little banner at the bottom of my video with an alternative view to what I'm talking about, or what they're trying to push it as the real facts of global change or climate change, go and have a look at it, because they've got that ice hockey stick graph that has already been in my opinion debunked and proven to be a load of lies. Guys, I said that we would return shortly back to this socialist behaviour, where they are no longer, happy to mentally abuse people that have an alternative view. They're going to start physically going after them. And I myself, even on my own private website, poleshiftnews.com, have had CO data charts removed by the organisations that are trying shut us up. If we lose the YouTube channel, there is the website as a backup, and you know, if we lose that, then don't worry, we will find an alternative, plan A, plan B and plan C. But I guarantee you, from this point on, more people are going to start waking up to what's going on in this world. They're going to be aware of the lies that the governments are telling them, and they're going to be aware of why that is. It's simply to raise taxes. It's a great idea. Think about how brilliant the idea of CO2 taxes are. It's a way of taxing the world, and they've managed to get away with it up until this point. They won't be giving back anybody this money, even if they've been proven to be liars. Not at this point has anyone took them to court, and I believe that this is something that's going to happen sooner or later. Someone's going to take these organisations to court, and they're going to have the battle of CO2, whether it's man-made caused or, you know, natural, which we know it's natural, but we're going to have the battle and we're going to beat them in court. That's if they're not paying off the judges, which, you know, they do at the end of the day. I mean, there's a big effort to obviously, you know, keep the CO2 taxes coming in. You know, I haven't got a problem personally with governments charging taxes. You know, at the end of the day, we need roads, we need hospitals and other facilities that the taxpayers' money goes into. And I understand that, you know, if everyone puts a bit in, everyone gets a bit out. I would have rather them just come clean and said, you know, we need to raise more taxes for hospitals or roads or infrastructure. You know, we need to replace this Victorian piping system that the water gets put through most of the country today. And to do that, you know, taxes have got to go up as a result of that. I just would rather have the truth than a pack of lies from these people. And I could probably swallow the fact that, okay, we've got to pay a little bit more tax then, haven't we? And so has everybody else. But what this is a stealth tax. This is a taxing method using lies, and I really don't like it. And I'm sure you guys are on board with me with this. So, you know, guys, I'm going to leave it here. You know, like I said, we've seen this burning of books back in 1942. We watched the Mayans have all their literature destroyed and burned when the new ideas was forced upon them. You know, this isn't new. This is an old tactic that's been used for thousands of years. It's back at our doors, guys. We live in a day and age where people would rather believe a load of lies than a load of truth. It's far easier to convince someone of a lie than it is the truth. You know, I worry for all you guys out there. I really do, because I know what is coming down the road, and it's ugly. You think your neighbour's your neighbour and isn't going to want what you've got when he hasn't got it. It's like I said, the behaviour of people will be described as zombie-like. When people haven't eaten for a week, they will kill you for it. When the electric grid goes down for 2 weeks, people resort to killing people. Listen, only 80 years ago, at the middle of the Second World War, have a look what was going on in Stalingrad when the food blockade went on. Cannibalism and deaths over food rations. We haven't evolved too differently over that period of time, guys. And these behaviours will be back quicker than British Airways. Trust me. Guys, if you want to support what we do at the Observatory, you know, the link down in the description. You can support us on PayPal or on Patreon. It's entirely up to you. And, you know, I'll say what I usually do, you know. Get some preparations going and, you know, do something today. Don't wait for tomorrow. As always, bye for now.